Well, the shameful thing that has happened on the issue of the contaminated fuel that got into Nigeria was an avoidable thing, because the last time we experienced such shameful calamity was in the days of Abacha. And even in the days of Abacha, what happened was it was a kind of fuel that came in but had a foul odor or smell. But in the case of this one, I mean, we saw how it went, caused serious destruction to vehicular assets and also to humans, because it has affected so many people. A lot of people experience health issues. What happened is a shameful thing to Nigeria. It has caused internal disgrace to Nigeria. It has caused embarrassment to Nigeria also on the international scene, bearing in mind that as we speak right now, the biggest crude oil cartel in the whole world is called Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And the person superintending over that powerful crude oil cartel is a Nigerian by name Alhaji Sanusi Barkindo. That was an insult to his personality, because that's a personality that is superintending over very powerful and strong countries, you know. And for that to happen to his country, first of all, they cannot refine crude oil internally. Then even when importing, they imported contaminated fuel. Even if his colleagues are not mocking him directly, but he will not be comfortable. And what is the guarantee that he is not even being mocked? So it's something very embarrassing. It's something completely avoidable, and it's painful and shameful. Before we even start talking about or analyzing the amount that NNPC said they needed to be able to take care of the contaminated fuel that got in, we need to ask ourselves basic questions on how the contaminated fuel got to Nigeria and caused us health calamities and vehicular calamities. As far as I'm concerned, and I stand to be challenged by anybody, the major control mechanisms failed. And the control mechanisms are supposed to be the preventive control mechanism, the detective control mechanism, and the corrective control mechanisms. And let me explain. When you talk about the preventive control mechanism, right from the point of loading, the boat or the vessel that loaded should not have even been allowed to head towards Nigeria. It should have been prevented. So for that vessel to have loaded a contaminated or adulterated fuel and head towards Nigeria, that means the preventive control mechanism failed. When the vessel got to the shores of Nigeria, ordinarily, if the detective mechanisms were working, the contaminated fuel should have been detected at that point, and it will have been halted. And once it is halted, Nigeria was supposed to release her strategic reserves and supply to her citizens while thinking of the solutions that needs to be provided and to remediate the issue. But because the detective mechanism failed, the contaminated fuel was able to get to Nigerian depots. And from Nigerian depots, it got distributed to retail outlets that we call filling stations. And even at that point, they couldn't detect anything until it damaged cars and started causing all kinds of calamities, and Nigerians started complaining. And even when Nigerians started complaining, nothing was done, because it took the Nigerian midstream and downstream petroleum regulatory authorities more than 72 hours to respond. after the damages and the calamities have been caused. So if you look at it, all the three control mechanisms, the preventive, the detective, and the corrective compensating mechanism or control mechanisms failed. So this is not different from what was happening in the days of Shekau. Because in the days of Shekau, the terrorists were not prevented from coming in. And when they even got in, they were not detected. And when they were, because they couldn't be detected, they came into the settlement of the citizens and caused all kinds of calamities. So what happened was not completely different. So the summary of what happens by the regulatory authority, which by extension is called NMPC, and by extension called Nigerian government, is a clear demonstration of negligence and irresponsibility. No, as far as subsidy is concerned, I have never been a supporter of subsidy removal. The reason is this: the only reason why a government exists is for the government to provide subsidy to her citizens. That is the only reason why government exists. And I want to explain to you. Many people don't understand what subsidy is all about. And by my own definition, subsidy is a globally accepted and universally accepted pain cushioning concept. It is supposed to reduce pains of citizens. And the only reason why government exists is principally to provide subsidy. And let me explain. When you see government having soldiers, having navy, having air force, having civil defense, having customs, having immigration, is because the government of that country wants to provide subsidy on security. When you hear that the government of a country is constructing roads across the country, it is because the government of that country wants to provide subsidy in transportation. When you hear that the government of a country has hospitals or constructed public hospitals, is because the government of that country is trying to provide subsidy in health. When you hear that the government of a country is providing or constructed public schools, whether primary school or university or secondary school, is because the government of that country is supposed to provide subsidy in education. So when you hear that citizens are telling their government to provide petrol or diesel or kerosene at affordable rates or price, is because the citizens want the government to provide subsidy in health. This is subsidy in energy. This is something that people may fail to understand. Government only exists to provide subsidy. And when government provides all these subsidies in the different areas, then government will expect her responsible citizens, whether they are individual citizens or corporate citizens, to comply with their regulatory civic obligations of paying taxes and levies. But before they will do that, the subsidies that the government has provided will enable the citizens, whether they are individual or corporate citizens, to embark on activities that will make them contribute to the aggregate growth of the economy. That is what people don't understand. Government exists principally to provide subsidies. And that's what I want to say about subsidy. And in the case of Nigeria, Nigerian citizens are asking for this petrol or diesel or kerosene because there is no electricity. As I'm speaking to you right now, Nigeria is a country of close to 200 million citizens with strategic industrial sectors, strategic commercial sectors, and strategic domestic sectors, relying on less than 10,000 megawatts of electricity. You don't need anybody or a soothsayer to tell you that Nigerians will resort to other means of generating energy to be able to carry out their activities. And the only thing they can rely on now are generators. If you go to hotels as I speak to you, if a hotel is a 200 room capacity hotel, whether they have only 10 guests or 20 guests, that hotel will run their diesel generator throughout the night. I mean, subsidy was deregulated and Nigerians are not complaining. They are liars. It's because they are not into the activities of real production. Go to factory owners, go to studio owners, like you go to the hospitals, go to the hotels and ask them, find out how much they are spending on diesel. Find out how much bankers are spending on diesel. When they wanted subsidy removed on diesel, they jacked the price to 120 and said the price will come down. From that time to now, the price has risen to 440 naira per liter of diesel. Where are those people that were saying when you deregulate diesel, the price will come down and investors will come down? Between you and I, investors are not coming. Quote me as I speak to you. It was in the same manner that they concocted and created a smoke screen called Petroleum Industry Act. When some of us were saying they shouldn't concoct it, they went ahead. From that time to now that they passed the Petroleum Industry Bill to an act, let them come out and mention one investor that has come to Nigeria. Investors are not coming, quote me. And as I speak to you now, even with the passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill to an act, investors are not coming. What is happening is that we have a situation where the international oil companies that we call IOCs are divesting out of the land and swamp or shallow water assets, oil and gas assets that they have in Nigeria. Investors are running away because of business climate hostilities. So everything that they've been concocting were lies. At a point, we had lies that modular refineries will come and reduce the problems we are having in petrol supply. That is another blatant lies by our leaders. As I speak to you right now, quote me, and I stand to be challenged. The kind of modular refineries we have in Nigeria cannot produce petrol because they are not equipped with catalytic cracking units. And with all the shameful things that our leaders are doing, refining is elementary chemistry. I stand to be challenged. Ask anybody, refining is elementary chemistry. Everything has to do with the principle of boiling the crude oil, then using distillation columns, then using what we call fractionating towers, because all the products will come out based on a principle of temperature. At a given temperature, LPG called cooking gas will come out. At another temperature, petrol will come out. At another temperature, diesel and other products will come out. And as I speak to you now, quote me, and I stand to be challenged by any process engineer or petroleum engineer or chemical engineer or mechanical engineer that I, Zakka Balla, said refining of crude oil is basic and elementary chemistry. And tell them that I said, I, Zakka Balla, said, as far as I am concerned, heart surgery, kidney transplant, or cesarean section operation is 10 times more complicated than the refining of crude oil. When people are saying the burden of subsidy and this and that and that and other, it's because those people don't understand how basic and simple economics work. If the only reason why people are elected and are called public leaders is because in the case of Nigeria, our leaders don't even know what it means to be called public leaders or public officers. My definition of a public officer is somebody that has been handed the assets of a nation, whether trust or asset, whether material or human assets, to hold in a fiduciary capacity. So what that means is that we have collectively as citizens handed over the economic, political, and social destiny of our country into their hands. And I want everybody to get this thing clear. The world is not being led by religion. The world is being governed and led based on principles and laws. Just like when you talk about the law of gravity, anything that goes up must come down. So if the principle of economics are not applied properly, the country will continue to collapse. As I speak to you now, we are supposed to be refining internally. You get the crude oil from the wellhead in Naira, refine it in Naira, sell to your citizen in Naira, generate Naira. That will first of all free you from exchange rate pressures. As long as you don't do that and you continue to import, your economy will grind to a halt. That is one. And another simple question is this: if China has state-owned refineries and are refining internally, Saudi Arabia has state-owned refineries, Brazil has, Malaysia has, United Arab Emirates has, Indonesia has, even troubled Libya has, Iran, Iraq, all have. Russia has state-owned refineries, but Nigeria does not have state-owned refineries. Are we saying the economists and the leaders of those countries are fools? And if they are not fools, who is the fool here? So as long as Nigeria continues to remain on the wrong economic trajectory, Nigeria will remain a melancholy country. And when I hear people saying, because of this subsidy, if we don't remove the subsidy, Nigeria is going to collapse. The question I ask them is, what if Nigeria was not even having crude oil at all? What is going to happen? If Nigeria was not even having crude oil at all, what is going to happen? Meanwhile, we have countries that do not have crude oil, but they have functional refineries. So does it mean if Nigeria doesn't have crude oil, all of us will go into slavery? That also is a point to the fact that our kind of leaders are not thinking, because with or without crude oil, we are supposed to exist as a nation. So when people are talking about this crude oil, okay, they've removed subsidy on diesel. What has been the benefit? They've removed subsidy on kerosene. What has been the benefit? The only thing remaining is PMS, and they are fooling themselves saying they want to remove this thing. So what if we were not even having crude oil? It is from this point that you will know that our leaders are truly shameless and are directionless, and I stand to be challenged by anybody. So based on the simple principle of what is supposed to work, it is because the leaders are not managing the economy very well. If they say they are spending so much on subsidy, why can't they provide electricity? If you provide electricity, there will be glut at the filling station. Nobody is going to waste his or her time going to buy diesel or kerosene. And as we speak now, because of this corona, many people are working at home. Many companies have their staff working at home, and many of those staff are using computers and are working online. And if there is no electricity, how do we expect those people to work? They must look for ways of generating energy or having power. And the only way to do that is by going to the filling station to either buy diesel or petrol. So it is shameless when some of us hear that that subsidy must be removed. And we have had another lies again, another set of lies. Many people are saying it is because the petrol in our country is cheaper than other countries, and that's why smuggling is taking place. So what I just want to ask the irresponsible technocrats that are coming up with that analysis is this: so because the cost of petrol is cheaper in Nigeria compared to the neighboring countries, so Nigerian government will need to increase the cost of petrol in Nigeria and punish her citizens to equilibrate it with the price of petrol in other countries. We should not even be talking talking about the amount marked for cleaning the adulterated fuel. There should be a thorough investigation, and we should have the culprits punished. That is the first thing that is supposed to happen. And the losses is supposed to be borne by those who supply the wrong fuel. And it is left to them to have themselves settle at whatever level, because even when those vessels were coming in, those that were given the contract or had the contract sublet to them, they were supposed to have insurance. They were supposed to have certifications as far as the quality of what they wanted to bring into Nigeria is concerned. So if they brought the wrong product, they are supposed to pay for the wrong product. The Nigerians must not bear the cost of recklessness, irresponsibility, and incompetence. Those who were given the contracts and decided to bring in the wrong products are those who should bear that responsibility. It is left to them to settle with their quality control or quality assurance laboratories or service providers at their own level. But it must never be borne by Nigeria. And another thing that should happen again, the Nigerians or regulatory authority personnel that allow this carelessness and disgrace to happen to Nigeria at local level and international level must be punished according to the laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. With all this confusion going on now, back and forth, all kinds of confusion, that will let everybody know that some of us who were against the passage of the petroleum industry bill were right. Because from what is happening now, since the petroleum industry bill was passed into law and it became an act, we have started seeing all kinds of confusion. That means at some points, the I's were not properly dotted and the T's were not properly crossed. Because for you to pass that bill into an act, there was a need to have congregated all oil and gas engineers, oil and gas accountants, oil and gas journalists like you, oil and gas economists, oil and gas lawyers, oil and gas environmentalists, to go through the document, review it, and make sure the way and manner it will be administered will be in the national interest of Nigeria. But it was quickly concocted, and we are seeing the result. Because at a point we learned that it will be unbundled. We heard that NNPC is going to become a limited liability company. Countries don't become limited liability companies. Government is supposed to provide goods and services. It is private individuals and corporate entities who could be citizens or foreigners that are supposed to be involved in the activities of profit maximization and cost minimization. But a country leadership is supposed to provide goods and services. So everything we are seeing now is the fallout of the Petroleum Industry Act. What is happening is a clear indication that so many things were concocted using the people I can best describe as unprincipled technocrats who decided to give themselves out as praise singers. Because when you are made a technocrat, you are supposed to be very objective and guide your principles right. So some of those technocrats, whether they call themselves economic think tank, whether they call themselves technical advisors, they fool the leaders, and by extension, they fool Nigerian leaders, and by extension, they fool Nigerians. Because when you are invited and made a technical assistant or a member of an economic think tank, the leaders brought you because they wanted you to come and make inputs in things that will help the country. What you can see from what is happening now, all those that were parading themselves as technocrats, technical advisors, technical this, technical that, economic think tank of the oil and gas in Nigeria, you can see now that they have failed themselves, they have failed their families, they have failed Nigeria. Well, before I give my advice, I want to define policy. by my own definition or explanation, policies are statements that convey philosophies of either individual or corporate entity or a nation, and must be seen to be reflected in the strategic thinking of strategic managers when you are dealing with corporate bodies, or must be seen to be reflected in the political thinking and strategic thinking of political leaders. And in the context of Nigeria now, then you will define policy as statements that convey the national philosophy of Nigerians and must be seen to be reflected in the political thinking of our leaders, because they are our leaders. So everything that has to be our policy must be seen to be reflected in their thinking as our leaders. And that is when now we will ask, what is the policy on Nigerian oil and gas industry? You see, many people cannot explain what the policy is, but asking for solutions now, what I would just say is the first thing is to admit that the Nigerian oil and gas industry, especially the downstream, has been on the wrong economic trajectory and wrong direction. And if it has been on the wrong trajectory and direction, we need to recalibrate everything and see how we can reposition it. So that is the first thing. The next thing again is for us to accept as Nigerians that the last time a refinery was constructed was in 1989. We are now in 2022. We're talking about 33 years. If in 33 years, the crop of leaders we had could not be able to maintain the refineries they inherited and could not construct new ones, we didn't need anybody to tell us that we were going to run into energy crisis, because population will have been increasing in the last 33 years. Activities that will require oil and gas, require vehicular movement, require energy will have increased. So we also need to acknowledge that. Another thing we need to do again is to understand that the value of an asset or a raw material can only be valued when you process it and crystallize or metamorphose it into a viable product. And to that extent, internal refining is the way forward. Because if all OPEC member nations and non-OPEC member nations are refining internally, and we are not refining internally, something is wrong with us as Nigerians and not them. Another thing again that needs to happen again is to look at this Petroleum Industry Act, revisit everything. All the I's needs to be dotted and the T's needs to be crossed. So that is the thing that needs to happen. Then we need to also understand that as we speak right now as Nigerians, because we're looking for solutions, everybody knows that even the OPEC quota, the quota that OPEC assigned to us as Nigerians, we've not been able to meet up with the OPEC quota. Meanwhile, when you talk about international price of crude oil, the two markers are one, West Texas Intermediate, WTI, and the Brent. And the Nigeria's Bonny Light is a crude oil that has reference with the Brent. And as we speak now, the Brent is selling at more than $90 per barrel. And Nigeria has not been able to meet up with our OPEC quota. Ordinarily, now that the Brent is selling that high, or at such a high rate of above $90 per barrel, it is now that we should be able as Nigerians to produce up to our OPEC quota and beg OPEC to give us more quota. So for us not to be able to be producing up to the OPEC quota, something is wrong. We should also know that as Nigerians, our 2022 budget was predicated on oil production of almost 1.8. million barrels per day, including condensates. So if we are not able to produce that, then that means we will continue to experience budget deficit. Why are we not able to produce? These are the fundamental questions we need to ask ourselves, because we are talking about solutions now. Again, as we are speaking right now, in the whole of Nigeria, there are less than 10 active drilling rigs. When you talk about the land rigs, the swamp rigs, and the deep offshore rigs, they are not up to 10. There was a time when Nigeria had more than 50 active drilling rigs drilling in a day. So for us not to have active rigs that are more than 10, that means the business climate is very, very hostile to investors, whether they are local or foreign investors. So we need to discuss all this and agree amongst ourselves that internally we have problems. And once we are ready to resolve these problems internally, the right people should be consulted to advise the government. The government should move away from technocrats that are unprincipled and that decided, and those who decided to reduce themselves to praise singers and political stooges, whether you call them economic team or whatever they call themselves. It is very clear now that Nigeria has lost her position as the leader of Africa, because before now, Africa was looking up to Nigeria to lead. Even with the African Continental Free Trade Area understanding, Nigeria has nothing to export. Because when you talk about balance of trade in Nigeria, Nigeria is exporting nothing. Nigeria is doing more of imports. So balance of trade is even negative. So the first thing we need to do is to accept and analyze all these issues. Then we now come out with genuine solutions. Because when we do that now, we will know that Nigeria has been on the wrong economic trajectory, especially as far as the oil and gas industry is concerned.